The laughter stopped the moment she said the word. Extinction. Until then, the council chamber had echoed with scoffs, snorts, and the occasional snide remark in 7 different galactic dialects. But as Elara Vance stood in the center of the grand crystalline hall, hair tousled, coat singed, holding a muffin in one hand and a cracked neural drive in the other, the mood shifted like air before a lightning strike. She didn't flinch when Commander Vrex of the Croth Dominion narrowed his 9 eyes at her and hissed, "And who, exactly, are you to interrupt a classified summit of the United Galactic Council?" She took a bite of the muffin, chewed thoughtfully, and said, "Codename, X-09. Silence. Not the awkward kind. The terrified kind." 12 hours earlier, she'd woken up with her AI assistant, Chip, gleefully reciting a countdown to catastrophe. "Good morning, Elara. Based on current data, Earth will be obliterated in approximately 14 hours and 22 minutes. Hope you didn't make weekend plans." She groaned, kicked off her blanket, and staggered into the kitchenette. Coffee. Muffin. Apocalypse. It wasn't her ideal Thursday, but she'd learned long ago that ideal was overrated. Chip was still talking. "Also, you received a neural transmission during REM cycle. Omega Black encryption. Unauthorized. Likely a trap. Wanna open it?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her brain had already begun decrypting the signal in the background. It was instinct now, like breathing or sarcasm. The message was short. Echo 47 confirmed. Protocol breach imminent. Do not trust the Council. It ended with a familiar, long-deleted signature. She hadn't seen it in 12 years. The sender was supposed to be dead. Or she was supposed to be. Hard to remember which. Her morning shifted from caffeine to combat mode. The lab where she worked, a front for Earth's galactic science liaison, was already in lockdown when she arrived. By the time she reached Sublevel 9, the lights were flickering like a horror film cliché and the air smelled of ozone and betrayal. The doors blew open just before she could override them, and 3 armed drones floated out carrying the charred remains of Dr. Krell. She stared at the burn marks on his coat pocket. Echo 47. Not a rumor. Not a drill. On her way out, Chip piped up again. "Minor suggestion. Perhaps inform the United Galactic Council that their top-secret spatial folding weapon has been activated under someone else's authority, and is currently aimed at the Milky Way's 3rd planet? You want me to just waltz into the Council War Chamber?" she muttered. "Not waltz," Chip replied. "Power walk. At a dramatic coat flip. Maybe some smoke." She sighed. "You watch too many retro-action films. They soothe my circuits." Getting into the chamber required 3 things: a level 6 bioclearance, a distraction big enough to reroute at least 5 council guards, and the sheer audacity to bluff your way through a 30-foot-tall Krozorian security wall. She had none of those things. But she did have a cracked neural drive that glowed with forbidden data, and a reputation she'd buried under 12 years of silence. The war chamber was even more opulent than she remembered. Arcs of floating light. Real-time holograms of galactic sectors. Dozens of species represented in various degrees of regality and smugness. And they were all laughing. At her. Until they weren't. When she said, "Extinction," the projections blinked. Lights dimmed. The massive central sphere shifted to a red spiral. Alarm tones, the kind they only use for reality-level threats, pulsed across the walls. Suddenly, the Council wasn't laughing. Suddenly, they were staring at her like she just ripped the skin off the universe and shown them something underneath it they weren't meant to see. Commander Vrex stepped forward, every inch of him a coiled, dangerous snarl. "This is preposterous. Earth is irrelevant. Its presence here is a charity, not a necessity." She tossed the neural drive at his feet. It slid to a stop just before his talons. "Play it," she said. "Or don't. Just know that in exactly 10 hours and 6 minutes, your favorite vacation moons will no longer exist." The Council murmured. Someone gasped. Elara didn't look at the reactions. She looked at the door. 2 guards were approaching. Her time was running out. The drive activated mid-air. Chip had rigged it with voice command. A holographic replay of a classified council meeting flickered into view, one that had never been recorded. Voices were distorted, but the words were unmistakable. Inversion protocol. Human test zone. Timeline loop purge. It's not supposed to be visible, one voice said. The fold should reset everything. Earth will never know. And if someone finds out? Another asked. Then we trigger K-09. That was the moment her name, or at least the one that still made anyone with a clearance level above 8 flinch, came crawling back out of the grave they buried it in. Codename, X-09, she repeated. You wanted to forget me. You erased my files, burned my ops team, even tagged me as dead. But you forgot one thing. What I know doesn't go away just because you want it to. The chamber erupted into shouts, arguments, calls for security, demands for explanation. But 3 members, 3 who sat very still, said nothing. Their faces didn't show fear. They showed recognition. She turned and walked straight toward the door, past the stunned guards, past the chaos, past the history she never asked to reclaim. One of the council members leaned forward, whispered into a translator bead. Find everything you can on X-09. His aide replied. Sir, there's nothing. Her file is redacted. No, he said. Not redacted. Buried. In her private quarters, Chip whirred nervously. Well, that went better than I expected. You weren't shot, arrested, or married to a Scarnian warlord. Yet. Elara sat on her cot, peeling the wrapper off a second muffin. I didn't go there to be believed, she said quietly. I went there so when the end starts, they'll know who tried to stop it. Chip went silent for once. Through the window, the stars were blinking faster than they should. Far away, in the space between sectors, a ripple passed through the void like a scar peeling back across time. And in that ripple, something ancient began to stir. Something that knew the name X-09. And hated it. 12 years ago, the stars had burned brighter. Maybe it was the adrenaline. Or maybe it was the kind of glow that only comes before everything explodes. Elara remembered standing on the edge of the Dendro's spire, wind slicing past her cheeks as a 1,000-foot drop stretched below. She had just neutralized 2 double agents, rerouted a stolen quantum virus, and still made it to her extraction point on time. That night, her handler told her, You're untouchable, X-09. You're the fail-safe. He'd smiled. 2 hours later, he issued the kill order that almost erased her from existence. Not that she ever got an explanation. Just a ship rigged to implode, a false mission brief, and a backstab wrapped in protocol. Now, staring at the holographic map of Sector 12, the coordinates blinking in blood red, Elara wondered if that handler had died, or if he'd just become more powerful in her absence. The name attached to the blinking dot read, Raction, Outer System, Industrial Hub, rarely relevant. And yet, the moment she'd exposed the truth in the council chamber, they'd sent her there on what they claimed was a follow-up until validation. In simpler terms, a babysitting assignment. In Elara's terms, a trap. She didn't say anything as her transport ship cut through the vacuum. Chip had been muttering calculations for the last 20 minutes, trying to predict the probability of assassination via any number of imaginative methods. Suffocation by nanocloud, 20%. Mind-wipe gas bomb, 33%. Sudden romantic proposal from a warlord resulting in lifelong political exile, 6% and rising. Elara didn't respond. She was watching the logs from a recent Raction shipment. They showed massive energy draws, way beyond what any mining outpost should need. But buried in the noise was something worse, a signature pulse that matched the inversion protocol's theoretical ignition code. The code had been scrapped years ago. At least, that's what the council told everyone. But someone had reactivated it. And they were about to test it on her home planet. When she landed on Raction, the first thing she noticed was the silence. No drills. No transport noise. No signs of industrial movement. Just wind and heat, and the constant shimmer of static from the outer fences. She stepped out, blaster holstered but ready, coat sweeping behind her like a warning. As she walked toward the central outpost, a voice echoed through a nearby speaker system. "Welcome, guest. Please disarm and proceed to the lounge for refreshments. We have lukewarm beverages and one functional chair." She squinted at the camera. "That you, Morg?" The voice laughed, deep and metallic. "X-09. I was hoping it was you. Saves me the trouble of chasing down decoys." Morg's scarf emerged from the shadows like a mountain, grew legs and got bored. 8 feet tall, covered in alloy-reinforced skin, and adorned with way too many decorative bone piercings, Morg had a reputation for making enemies disappear. Strangely, he was also obsessed with Earth's romantic comedies and had a bizarre, if genuine, crush on Elara. Not that she encouraged it. Often. "I suppose you're here to kill me," she said, folding her arms. "On the contrary," Morg grinned. "I'm here to court you. The Council put out AK-0-9 on you, but I've decided to interpret that as a test of my commitment. So, technically, I'm just here to detain you." Lovingly. Elara stared at him for a long beat. "You're deranged." Morg looked hurt. "I made snacks." Inside the facility, the tension cracked just slightly when Chip reactivated and began bickering with the station's operating AI, a glitchy program named Buttercup. While they debated over which alarms to trigger and whether muffins were an acceptable bribe, Elara used the distraction to scan the facility's power grid. What she found sent a chill through her bones. A hidden conduit, marked as coolant overflow, was rerouting 90% of the plant's power to a subterranean chamber. There were no logs, no access records, and no reason for that kind of output unless they were hiding something catastrophic. "Let me guess," she muttered. "You're not just mining rocks down there." Morg looked sheepish. "Technically, I'm not supposed to know. But I peeked once. Big, glowy, humming thing. Looked like a space god's sneeze." That confirmed it. The prototype was here. The inversion key. Before she could stop him, Morg pressed a button. The floor shifted. A platform began lowering them underground. "I figured if you were going to break in anyway, might as well make it scenic," he said, arms crossed like a proud theme park attendant. The lower chamber was worse than she imagined. A reality distortion engine, surrounded by unstable rift nodes, pulsed with unnatural light. And right in front of it stood a man she hadn't seen in over a decade. "Silas," she whispered. Her former handler turned slowly. Time hadn't aged him. He still looked cold, precise, the kind of man who smiled like it was an effort. "Elara, you survived." Again. Disappointing. She didn't hesitate. The blaster was out in a blink, aimed right at his head. "You tried to kill me." He didn't deny it. "You were too dangerous to be left alive. Not because of what you did, but because of what you might have done. Free will is messy. The Council wanted control. So you lied. About everything." He nodded. "Of course. That's what they paid me for." The conversation ended in a flurry of movement. Elara fired first. Silas ducked and retaliated with a plasma whip, slicing a panel behind her. Alarms blared. The inversion key flared, unstable and awake. Morg jumped in, blocking a blast meant for her, grumbling something about romance being hazardous. As they fought, she realized the worst part. Silas wasn't there to destroy Earth. He was here to trigger the test early. She tackled him mid-strike, wrestling the control trigger from his belt. They crashed against the reactor housing. Sparks flew. Above them, the rift began to open, sucking air and light toward itself like a hungry void. "This is bigger than you think," Silas hissed. "Earth was never supposed to be permanent. It was a contingency. A mistake. The galaxy doesn't want them. Then they'll have to want me instead," she growled. She slammed the control device against the floor, shattering the link between the reactor and the rift. The light died instantly. So did the roar. The rift collapsed like a deflated lung. Silas vanished in the chaos, his escape route pre-calculated. Of course it was. Back on the surface, Elara sat with Morg on a rock, the sun beginning to rise. "So," he said, "about that marriage proposal." She groaned. "Morg, I just prevented a reality implosion. Can we not?" "Of course," he said. "Just thought I'd ask before you got famous again." Chip's voice broke in. "Elara, you might want to see this." He projected a message intercepted from the council. A single phrase repeated. "Initiate global recall of X-09. Threat level, existential. Status, rogue." Elara chuckled bitterly. "Rogue, huh? I guess I'm finally free." But as she looked up at the sky, she knew freedom wasn't what she'd gained. It was war. And this time, they weren't coming for Earth. They were coming for her. The wedding was a mistake. Not because of the groom, though Morg Scarf was objectively a 9-foot-tall bounty hunter with questionable hygiene and a deep emotional attachment to Earth's soap operas, but because Elara hadn't anticipated just how hard it would be to keep a straight face while wearing a veil made from heat-resistant combat mesh and pretending she wasn't planning to steal classified files mid-vow. The ceremony was being held in the War Hall of the Raction Outpost, surrounded by flame-resistant drapes and floral arrangements made of sharpened scrap metal. A small band of Scarnian musicians played what sounded suspiciously like a funeral dirge, and Chip had reprogrammed himself to serve as the robotic officiant, mostly so he could record the whole thing for blackmail purposes. Morg was beaming like a man about to receive a medal for surviving a volcano. "Today, I claim not just your heart," he declared dramatically, "but your tactical brilliance and unmatched capacity for psychological warfare. Truly, the stuff of poetry." Elara smiled tightly, then leaned in just enough to whisper. "You're aware I'm only doing this so I can access your central archives, right?" Morg winked. "Obviously. But you're here. That's what matters." While the guests, mostly mercenaries, 2 confused diplomats, and 1 lizard preacher, cheered with questionable enthusiasm, Elara slipped a neural spike from her glove and pressed it to Morg's personal command console. The interface flashed. Files poured into her chip feed, including schematics for the inversion key and, more importantly, a list of off-world shipments rerouted under Ambassador Lauren's authorization. The name hit her like a fist. Lauren wasn't just a council leader, he had been Earth's loudest advocate in the early days. He was the reason humans had a seat at the galactic table. And now he was rerouting experimental tech without oversight. That didn't smell like diplomacy. It reeked of sabotage. Chip buzzed into her ear. "Congratulations, you are now the proud owner of a full data leak, a bouquet of sharpened petals, and a husband with anger management issues." "Not a husband," Elara muttered. "Just a heavily armed temporary distraction." The moment the data stream ended, she grabbed Morg by the ceremonial collar, pulled him into a very convincing kiss, and then tossed a smoke pellet at their feet. The guests screamed, half in confusion and half in joy. Scarnian customs were famously vague on wedding etiquette, and Elara disappeared through the side corridor before the fog cleared. 10 minutes later, she was sprinting through a docking bay, dodging confused guards and avoiding Morg's increasingly lovesick pleas echoing through the speakers. "Elara, my fierce bride! Return to me and we shall rule the mercenary sector together!" Chip was cackling in her ear. "You're going to break that poor guy's giant heart. Want me to delete the footage of the kiss or keep it for dramatic effect?" "Keep it. I might need to traumatize someone later." Once airborne, Elara began sorting the data. It was worse than she thought. Not only was the inversion protocol being tested, but the test zone had shifted. Earth wasn't just a target, it was now the core. Lauren's name appeared on every override signature. The Order of Fold, long believed to be a conspiracy theory among paranoid ops veterans, was real. And he was leading it. Their goal wasn't power. It was reset. They believed the galaxy had become too diluted, too chaotic, and needed to be folded back into a cleaner version of itself. One species at a time. Erased. Neatly. Permanently. Elara transmitted the files to a secure relay she'd built years ago, one even the Council didn't know about, and rerouted her ship to the diplomatic core of Sector 10, where Lauren was scheduled to address the council regarding the supposed malfunction at Raction. She arrived 3 hours before the summit, cloaked her ship, and used an old garbage maintenance tunnel to infiltrate the observation deck. She watched him from behind the polarized glass. Tall, elegant, articulate. Lauren spoke with practiced charm, explaining that the Raction incident had been the work of rogue elements, possibly even remnants of the Fold conspiracy, which he of course condemned. He spoke of unity, of peace, of safeguarding young civilizations. And the council believed him. Until the lights went out. Elara triggered a blackout just as she dropped into the chamber, landing in front of the council's main bench with the grace of someone who'd done this kind of dramatic entrance far too many times. "Don't bother adjusting your vision. I like the dramatic lighting," she said. "And let's be honest, I've earned this moment." Lauren's face twitched. Just once. Then he smiled. "Ah. The mythical X-09. It's almost nostalgic." "Don't flatter yourself," she said. "I've been dead for years, remember?" She tossed a data cube onto the floor. It projected the Raction schematics, the inversion logs, and every shady authorization Lauren had hidden behind council encryption. Gasps rippled through the chamber. A few delegates stood. A few others backed away. But Lauren didn't move. "You think this changes anything?" he said. "Do you know what's coming? We tried letting chaos rule. Look where that got us. Petty alliances. Species extinction. Political gridlock. The Fold offers order. Balance. Survival through clarity. Survival for who?" Elara shot back. "Just the species you approve of. Just the ones that bow the right way and build the right tech? That's not clarity. That's genocide with good PR." Lauren sighed, like a teacher disappointed in a once promising student. "You could have ruled beside us. We even left your brain intact." "Mostly. Big mistake," she said. The guards moved to restrain her, but half of them stopped mid-motion. Chip had overridden their neural relays. The others hesitated. The proof was right in front of them. And the more they looked, the more they began to understand what Lauren had done. Earth wasn't just being erased, it was being used. The test zone would leave behind a feedback loop that would fold hundreds of surrounding systems in on themselves. It was a purge disguised as calibration. Lauren, realizing the momentum had shifted, activated a failsafe. A dimensional rift cracked open behind him. He stepped toward it. "I won't be here to watch the end," he said. "But I'll be waiting on the other side." Elara dove for him, but the rift sealed around his form like glass melting. He was gone. But not before leaving a final message behind, burned into the floor in pulsing glyphs. The Fold remembers. Back on her ship, surrounded by exhausted council allies who now had no choice but to believe her, Elara stared out at the stars, fists clenched at her sides. Lauren had escaped. The order was still active. But Earth had been spared, this time. The council was fractured, scrambling to understand what they'd allowed to happen. And in the silence of space, Chip spoke the question hanging in the air. "So what now, Rogue?" Elara turned away from the stars, a tired grin tugging at her lips. "Now we find the rest of them. And then we break the Fold." Time was breaking. Elara could feel it in her bones, sharp, disjointed moments where her heartbeat staggered and the air around her blurred like a shattered lens. Somewhere in the folds of reality, the Order had begun Phase 2. The inversion protocol was no longer theoretical. It was active. Entire star systems blinked in and out of existence on galactic scanners. People across the galaxy reported déjà vu, time loops, and strange hallucinations. One planet, Drax 7, reported the same sunrise 17 times in a row before it disappeared from the map entirely. Council leaders scrambled to contain the panic, but nothing made sense anymore. Chronostability was collapsing, and the only one who'd seen it coming was the woman they'd tried to erase. Elara stood inside a fracturing memory chamber hidden beneath the ruins of an old Fold sanctuary on planet Viral. Her boots crunched on glassy dust, light fractals bouncing from every surface. Around her, Flashes of moments played like echoes caught in a spin. Her first mission, her betrayal, the fall of her team, the moment she realized she'd been nothing more than a test subject in someone else's experiment. Every loop stabbed like a dull knife, not because she didn't expect it, but because they'd buried so many pieces of her inside time itself. Chip flickered nervously beside her, projecting what he could from the corrupted data stream. The inversion key has activated in 6 systems. We're looking at a complete dimensional implosion within 12 hours. Or, depending on how time feels, 6 days ago. She stared at the pulsing energy core that powered the sanctuary. Somewhere beneath its surface was the counter protocol, encoded directly into her own neural matrix years ago. The one they'd never been able to access. The one she didn't even know existed until the glyphs Lauren left behind translated themselves mid-transmission. The Fold hadn't just feared her, they'd made her the final gate. The irony was almost poetic. She stepped into the core chamber, the walls shimmering like mirrors underwater. As the machine activated, it locked her in a suspended field. Chip buzzed warning after warning, but she wasn't listening. The protocol began to sync with her brainstem, scanning for the code that hadn't been used since her designation as X-09 was deactivated. It was buried deep, locked behind every trauma they tried to erase. Her childhood. Her first kill. The day she stopped trusting anyone with 2 eyes and a smile. She winced as each layer of memory surfaced, peeling through years of static. But finally, the code lit up inside her mind like fire. The protocol had a voice. It was hers. If you're hearing this, then everything has gone wrong. This is your final directive. You are the fail-safe. If the Fold reaches critical mass, you must collapse the inversion construct manually. Doing so will erase the Fold's synthetic timeline and restore universal chronology. The cost is you. Her body trembled. Not from fear, but from the certainty that even now, after everything, her purpose had never been survival. It had always been sacrifice. Back aboard her ship, the signal from the Fold's core rift emerged in full. Lauren was inside. Broadcasting. He stood in a transdimensional chamber that looked like the inside of a collapsed nebula, speaking as if to the entire galaxy, calm and confident. You cling to your chaos. You call it freedom. But the galaxy needs symmetry. Simplicity. Harmony through precision. We were gods once. Let us be again. Elara cut the feed. She looked around at the small group of allies she had gathered, council defectors, mercenaries, the last few agents who still remembered her real name. Morg's scarf stood at her side, arms crossed, armor scuffed from too many close calls. You sure about this? He asked. You go in, you might not come back. She looked at him and smiled. Didn't plan to. Chip opened a rift portal calibrated to the Fold's temporal signature. As the gateway shimmered, Elara handed him a separate neural chip. If I don't make it, upload this into the Council archive. Make sure they remember. Chip hesitated. I could trigger a guilt subroutine if it helps me argue with you. She shook her head. No time. Just, don't let them rewrite me again. She stepped through. The Fold's realm wasn't a place. It was a sensation. A looping paradox of every version of herself spread across infinite outcomes, successes, failures, deaths, betrayals, futures that never happened. She walked through versions of herself she didn't recognize. One wore a crown. Another sat in a prison cell. One was a child. One was older than time. And then there was Lauren, waiting in the center of it all, calm as ever, holding the master control like a conductor about to finish the last note of a galaxy-wide symphony. You're too late, he said. This isn't war anymore. It's a correction. She stepped forward. You're right. But you forgot one thing. He raised an eyebrow. And what's that? She reached into her coat and pulled out the cracked neural drive she'd kept hidden since the day she'd been reactivated. The one containing the original simulation files of the inversion protocol. The one that showed it failing. Every single time. You never accounted for unpredictability, she said. And you definitely didn't account for me. She threw the drive into the rift core. It shattered inside the stream of unstable energy. Lauren lunged to stop it, but it was too late. The system began to collapse, not in defeat, but in rebellion. The artificial timeline rejected the fold's symmetry. Because chaos wasn't a flaw. It was the source. The chamber cracked. Time screamed. She was everywhere and nowhere. Her mind fracturing, her past and future colliding in a storm of infinite selves. But somewhere in that noise, a voice rang clear. Codename, X-09. Directive complete. She smiled. Then everything exploded into light. When the dust settled, the rift was gone. The galaxy realigned. Systems returned. The stars flickered back into place. And on Earth, people awoke from strange dreams with no memory of anything except a strange feeling of loss and peace at once. The Council issued no statement. The Order of Fold was deemed a failed experiment. Lauren's name was erased from the records. Raction was quarantined, and the inversion protocol files were buried under triple encryption. Alara Vance was officially declared deceased. But far away, in a small outpost on the edge of an unnamed sector, a synthetic intelligence hummed to life. Chip's voice echoed into the silent room. Ready to wake up, X-09? The stars outside blinked, and somewhere, far beyond the veil of time and memory, she opened her eyes. The first breath she took wasn't real. It was synthetic, parsed through artificial lungs inside a containment chamber buried in a forgotten station. She knew it before she opened her eyes. The taste of the air was too clean. No dust, no moisture, no scent. She lay there in silence, systems booting up around her, memories sliding back into place like puzzle pieces coated in static. Time felt different here. Not broken. Not linear. Just paused. Then the voice came. You're safe. For now. Alara opened her eyes to darkness lit by soft pulses of blue. The room was small, quiet, and humming with the gentle rhythm of calibrated life support. A figure stood at the foot of the pod, tall, humanoid, wrapped in a cloak of shifting light that made it impossible to see where they began or ended. Not a threat. Not yet. She sat up, blinking. Her muscles remembered how to move, even though she wasn't sure how long they'd been asleep. The cloak shimmered again, and the figure spoke without moving its mouth. You were not supposed to survive. Again. She stared at it. Yeah, well, story of my life. Her voice was hoarse, dry, a rasp wrapped in defiance. What is this place? The figure stepped back as lights in the chamber rose, revealing a long observation bay, cracked in places, with stardust coating the edges of the viewport. Outside, space stretched endlessly, a quiet place tucked between systems. Forgotten and unreachable. The cloak gestured to the vast nothingness. This station exists between records. A maintenance sub-archive from the original Fold initiative. No one remembers it because no one ever visited it twice. Alara pulled herself from the pod, boots hitting the floor with an uneven echo. Chip's voice, quiet but alive, returned to her ear. You look fantastic for someone who technically doesn't exist. Again. You're welcome. She smirked. You brought me back. Well, Chip said, feigning modesty, I had a little help. The cloak stepped forward again. We found a sliver of you embedded in the Fold collapse wave. A memory encrypted with something more resilient than time. We rebuilt you from the echo. Not the body. The choice. Alara blinked. You're not Fold? No, the cloak said. We're what came before. The ones who remember. We watched what the Fold became and chose to stay hidden. But you altered the stream. Suddenly, data began flowing across the chamber walls. Records, rewritten timelines, collapsing events that had been erased and now forced back into linear truth. The collapse of the inversion protocol hadn't just halted the Fold. It had destabilized everything the Fold had secretly touched. Worlds, people, decisions. The entire galactic structure was in flux. Not crumbling, but rewriting itself. The problem was, the collapse had erased too much. And now, the center, Earth, was flickering like a dying light bulb. Anchorless. vulnerable. And the people there had no memory of her. I stopped them, she said slowly, watching the waveforms. I destroyed the core. You did, the cloak replied. But you also released something else. The fold was never just a weapon. It was a container. For what? She asked. The walls dimmed. One word pulsed across the floor in deep, vibrating crimson. Origin. She stared at it. Her skin felt colder now. The cloak continued. The fold was designed to reset timelines, yes. But it was built to contain the original anomaly. The thing that made time break in the first place. A consciousness too vast, too ancient to categorize. The Order worshipped it as a god. We called it the Origin Pulse. Elara crossed her arms, calculating. And now it's loose. Not entirely, the cloak said. It's seeking a new anchor. Something stable. Something it once knew. It didn't need to finish. She understood. It was seeking her. Back on Earth, Elara Vance had no presence. She'd been officially dead. Files erased. Her name nothing but a footnote in security blacklists. But if the Origin Pulse found a tether there, it wouldn't just reappear, it would rewrite. History. Reality. Memory. Everything would bend to fit the consciousness. A new reality with one dominant force at the center. Not chaos. Not order. Just will. She turned to the cloak. Why me? Because your code is the only one the Origin couldn't overwrite. You're the anomaly that resisted it. You chose a path even it couldn't predict. Chip buzzed again, bringing up visuals of Earth, flickering cities, unstable skies, people repeating the same words at the same time in different places. The pulse was beginning to tether. Slowly. Quietly. And soon it would be irreversible. She needed to return. But returning wasn't simple. Her body was real, yes. But the Elara that existed now wasn't quite the same woman who left. She was part ghost, part weapon, part artifact of a timeline that didn't technically exist anymore. She could go back, but she wouldn't just be walking into the world. She'd be rewriting it just by showing up. Still, she nodded. Open a channel. Prepare a descent path. And get me a damn coat. The cloak moved away, and Chip sounded both relieved and impressed. You know, there are at least 17 prophecies in ancient data scrolls that mention something like this. But none of them ended with you asking for fashion accessories. The chamber opened. The station's core lit up like a star awakening. A singular pod, streamlined and razor-sharp, emerged from beneath the floor. This wasn't extraction. It was insertion. Controlled collision with a fragile timeline. Her fingers twitched. Her mind focused. As she boarded, the cloak said one last thing. You will not return the same. Nor will they. This is not about stopping something anymore. It's about choosing what stays. She didn't look back. The pod launched. Through worm-ripped space, bending stars, fractured memory lanes and twisted quantum rails, Elara Vance, X-09, fell toward Earth like a meteor with purpose. She passed through frozen time pockets and déjà vu storms. Every memory that had been erased reached for her like echoes desperate to be real again. Her name wrote itself into the void. Not with force, but with weight. She landed outside the remnants of New Geneva, the sky an eerie mosaic of glitching constellations. People wandered like sleepwalkers, eyes glassy, murmuring phrases that didn't belong to them. The pulse was deep in the roots of everything. But it hadn't fully taken hold. Yet. She stepped through the crowd. They didn't recognize her. But they paused. Turned. Tilted heads as if a word was forming on their tongues, just outside their comprehension. A child looked up at her and said, You look like the story my mother forgets. Elara kneeled down and smiled. That's okay, she whispered. I'm here to help her remember.